Hey, what's up, guys? I've shaved. I'm gonna get a haircut soon, so the next time you see me, this will be a little bit shorter. I won't have all this hanging out and stuff. But I decided after watching some YouTube videos that I would do a library tour. Now, there were two main channels that were the reason for that. I watched the podcast Life on Books, and the guy Tony from that, I think his name is Tony, just did a library tour, and I thought it was interesting. The second thing is I watched the podcast, or not the podcast. I watched the content of Man Carrying Thing. I find him very funny, and I like his book insights. And he did a top five for the year. So he's got a new kid, and even this guy who makes all these videos, they're very funny, manages to create more content and read. So I'm going to do a library tour. And since the beginning of the channel, I've thought I should probably do a library tour. I've got a lot of books. My library is in the ballpark of 1,500 books. I haven't read all of them. It sounds like, compared to some people, I may have read a lot of them. I've read between 2/3 and 3/4 of those books. It begins to be a complicated thing when you're talking about collections and all this stuff to really try to count this out. At one point, I had tried to at least figure out how many of my books I had read, and that's where I got the percentage between 2/3 and 3/4. It falls somewhere in there. It changes to, or it has over the life of my library. Okay, so that's my brief introduction for the library. I'm not totally sure where we're going to begin. I'm making this as an opening that I can rely on after the fact. I'm going to let you know right now the way the library is organized. You can see different shelves here. There's a big Anton Chekhov collection right there. That's my baby. I've got like Germany over here. So basically, I've got 3 nonfiction bookshelves. Two of them are about hip height, and one has, well, we'll talk about what they have on them eventually, but one has books that were like textbooks for me for school and books that I studied for work. It's network certificates and stuff, and IT stuff. I haven't completed all of the certificates associated with those textbooks. I've completed some of them. Some of them are for school and so forth. But that's basically what's going on there. Then my other nonfiction bookshelf is a more like a history. So it's got mostly history, some stuff about politics, not a huge amount, but there is some. I've got some memoirs on there, old memoirs. I've got Thomas Dickinson, for instance. But I've got writer biographies on that shelf too. And then we've got my real nonfiction bookshelf, which nonfiction people would probably say this is basically almost fiction. And that is a bookshelf devoted to philosophy, literary theory, political theory, and religion. So I have, in the course of my education, studied the Bible some in an academic environment, but not at any kind of very serious level. I kind of, hopped in, said hello, got some credits, and said goodbye. So I've got like 3 Bibles, I think, or 2. I've got a bunch of holy books from different locations in the world. I've got my Shakespeare and my Dante on that shelf as well. But basically what that shelf is a course of thought through time, so to speak. I've got, starting with religion, goes up to philosophy. My philosophy stays strong until about 1700s. So the bookshelf starts with the Bible, and then it travels up in terms of time, and I'll explain that in a moment too. But it goes from the Bible, basically, and the religious foundation is the way the shelf is organized, up to contemporary literary theory and political theory. Think people like Frederick Jameson, for instance. Rorty. I have a Rorty book I haven't read yet. Who else? Judith Jack Halberstam. So I kind of traverse that. Now, there are two other things that that show up in the bookshelf, and that is there's a French section, a whole new bookshelf just for French, and then there is basically my literature throughout the world. The French bookshelf is organized roughly according to time, starting with the earliest books at the top and going down to the very contemporary stuff at the bottom right. My French shelf is probably a 50-50 split between theory and conventional literature, poetry, novels, and so forth. Now, the other bookshelves, and what we see here, this is kind of a grab bag shelf. Now, formally, what is in that shelf is poetry in English, theater in English, save for Shakespeare, and poetry in English, stuff like that. What has actually happened is that it's really a collection of just books that I've half read and convinced myself I've returned to. They happen to fall into those genres, but it's really more of a in-waiting kind of situation. Now, behind me, for instance, you've seen this shelf in my channel before. And if you look at the bottom right, that's a book by Gerald Murnane, who is Australian. And I've got something Garner, who wrote Monkey Grip, which is a very famous Australian novel, a piece of autofiction. Not my favorite novel. I thought Murnane was better, but it was interesting. Anyway, what we're doing is traveling from east to west, sort of, and also south to north. We're going from Australia up toward Russia. So my whole bookshelf is organized according to two main principles. That's region and chronology or time. So here we've got a swoop of the world from Australia up through the Middle East, and we've got Russia up here, and this travels all around the world over to Canada and the US, and basically the US kind of takes over everything. It gets like 4 shelves to itself because I'm from the US, I'm American. I think that's enough of an introduction for what we're going to do. I've tried to make this intro a few times, and it's been hard for me to pin down exactly how I want to make this video. But I think with this as my base, we can move forward. Where we're probably going to start is nonfiction. Alright guys, so what you're looking at here is the professional shelf I mentioned. I thought that we'd start with the most boring and just kind of rip things off the band-aid, so to speak. What we're going to do is travel around the room rather than necessarily me jump here and there, and I'll explain that more when we get there. But these books are probably not very interesting to you. My channel is a literary channel. I'm not someone who makes a lot of how-to videos about technical aspects of things. I have certifications. I've studied for a diploma in it, you know, a bachelor's degree. But I like to think of myself, if I can smirk about it, as more Steve Jobsian. Maybe I'm somebody who likes to bring arts into the more technical realm, so to speak. But here we've got, on the left side, we've got some security stuff, a book on Linux. I've got some networking certificate stuff. I've got textbooks that I worked on in college, sequel book. Then after the MCSA book, what you're seeing is conventional French resources that I use to study French. That is a stack of vocab note cards, and to the far right of that is it's two textbooks that were associated with teaching English as a foreign language. I got a certificate and had planned on doing that, and rather than do that, I actually got the IT degree and just kind of buckled down at work. At the bottom shelf, you'll see the cookbooks. To the right are kind of more textbook type literature books. So there are Norton anthologies. I've got a John Gardner, How to Read Like a Writer, or How to Write Fiction, one of those books. Francine Prose. Now, that striped book there is about poetic rhythm and meter, and it's phenomenal. It's called Poetic Rhythm, and it's by a guy, I think it's, we'll see if we can see that. I think that's Derek Attridge. So Derek Attridge, Poetic Rhythm is great. Now, if you can see up here, aside from the can of La Croix, I've got books that make this maybe more interesting for you. My rooms are constantly in use. This is basically like my little habitat, and I cleaned up some for this video, let's say it like that. Now I'm going to move in those so that we can see those, because over here I've got some Henry James and a Bible, and then we've got some stuff up here. Now most of this stuff I have not read on top of here. Some of it I have, I believe, yes. What we've got over here is some theater and a book called Satanism and Witchcraft by a very old French sociologist. Basically discusses the idea that witchcraft would have been more amenable to people who were second-class citizens, basically women, and why that might have worked. This theater stuff I have read. It's Beckett. I have read so much Samuel Beckett in 2 languages that it's not even here or there. Notes, Counter Notes, I have not read. I would like to read this. This is by Eugene Ionesco. I don't know how many people read Ionesco today. The Bald Soprano is very famous. He's another theater of the absurd guy. And this is Notes on Theater. According to Susan Sontag, it's not the best criticism book ever, but for me, I like Ionesco. I'd like to read it. What we've got here is Why Nations Fail. I believe that's an economics book. I got that just kind of on a whim. I haven't read it yet. Spivak. We've got J.M.G. Leclésio in French. Now I've read Desert, which is that book there. Let's see if you can see that better. Now I've got some Pascal Quignard also. That is W.G. Sebald, Pascal Quignard essay, and Saussure Cours de Linguiste Générale. Now, also in this part of the room, on a nice old chair, I've got some various books. This is a Pascal Quignard essay book. This is a biography of Georges Bataille, and I believe that was featured on Better Than Food, the English translation. I've got John D'Agata's book About a Mountain, which is about nuclear waste disposal. I've got one of my several Bibles, and I've got a Henry James novel. I haven't read that one yet. That was what I was thinking of reading next. So here is the kind of more miscellaneous section. It does technically conform to the idea that it should be poetry and theater, but there is some more prose-oriented stuff on there. I don't have a huge amount to say about this collection of poetry here, because poetry is not really my subject. I do like French poetry. I'm going to see if I can make that a little cleaner for you. And we've got a lot of things. This is all English language, though. I've got a copy of Our Town, like Thornton Wilder. I've got a big old copy of the Cantos by Pound. The ubiquitous online, more recently, Sarah Kane collection of theater, John Keats. Luigi Pirandello is another dramatist associated with the theater of the absurd. I've got a copy of Pirandello, a collection. 6 Characters in Search of an Author is a great play. I've got Walt Whitman up there. I love Walt Whitman. He's the purple Barnes & Noble copy. And I don't know, you can basically see it. What's up here that I'd probably most recommend is the Harold Pinter, the David Mamet. I loved Paradise Lost and Regained, and Frank O'Hara's great also. Now, up here I've got Poe, a book of Derrida. I'm not sure what that book below that is. And Le fin du monde est un concept sans avenir. And that's Paul Virilio. That collection of Virilio is huge. When I bought it, I thought it was a normally sized book with a large number of essays. It's basically a complete collection in this enormous phone book style book here. Okay, so here we're going to start with fiction, and what I've got going on in fiction is what I had already mentioned. I've got mostly Australia down there, Japan. I forget where Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie is from, but I have her 2 books, her novels. Then above that, I've got part of Africa. I've got Amos Tutuola, Chinua Achebe. I've got South Africa with Coetzee, and that goes into Egypt. And we've already talked about my interest in Egyptian literature. It's not nearly as intense as my interest in French literature, but I do have some interest in Egyptian literature. Now up here, it goes into Russia, and I've got a Sorokin book that I haven't read. I've got a copy of Dr. Zhivago that I found. I've got A Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. I haven't actually read that yet. I do plan to. I've got short stories. You can see that, and the Tolstoy. Mentioning the stuff I haven't read in this shelf is a much shorter list than the stuff that I have. The main stuff that I haven't read is the Russian stuff to the right up there. I haven't really read the Sorokin. I haven't read Solzhenitsyn or Pasternak. I did read one of Bulgakov's books, but I didn't read Master Margarita. I read Heart of the Dog. We're going to go over to where Russia goes over here. And if you can see down there, there are some more classical Russian things. I've got Crime and Punishment, The Idiot, well, actually most of Dostoevsky. I've got Turgenev, just a bunch of stuff here. I have read pretty much all of my Dostoevsky. So that's like 5 big novels in a collection. I haven't read the Turgenev or the Lermontov, and I didn't read Oblomov. I've read both those collections of Gogol, and I've read the Pushkin. Continuing to the left here, we've got Portugal, Greece also, if you see Zorba the Greek. I haven't read that. I've read the Saramago, except for the Gospel according to Jesus Christ. Pretty much everything else there I read. I don't know if that's really important. I realize now it could sound like I'm bragging. As I said, I've read about 66 to 75% of these books. We've got Milan Kundera, IBS, Isaac Bashevis Singer, Olga Ravin. We've got my Jelinek and my Bernhard. Here is the Robert Musil, from which I take the name of my introduction video to this channel, a sort of introduction. So there's our Musil. I got very into Musil in college. If you asked me now to discuss his more specific philosophical points, I'd have difficulty. But I do have a general overview of The Man Without Qualities. I read most of the second volume. It turns into notes. So at a certain point with the notes, even somebody who was in love with the book, such as myself, eventually you're bound to lose interest. But it is there existing. So if you like Musil, I encourage it. If you can see though, I have 2 other Musil books. I have a short story collection and The Confusion of Young Torless. Yeah, it's Musil is great. I also have Herman Brock. Brock is... I've seen more recently a lot of people reading the Death of Virgil. I haven't read that, but The Sleepwalkers is a phenomenal book. If you see below, I have some Milan Kundera. Kundera, when I was in college working on my literature degree, played an unusually significant role in what I thought I wanted to do with a novel and how I wanted to study it. So a lot of European novels that I've got here, especially stuff like, if you see down here, the Bruno Schulz and the Ferdi Durka by Gombrowicz, that's all kind of shepherded in by the thoughts of Milan Kundera, and they are expressed in The Art of the Novel, which is a great essay collection, but you can get a lot of ideas about contemporary European literature from that. Now, that said, there are a few writers who seem to be taking what Kundera thought would happen very seriously, not necessarily associating that with him, but the way that they approach irony in essays. In French, we will get to that. But what I've got up here, I continue to show the Musil, the Thomas Mann. I think that's how you say that. Is that it's not Mann, it's Thomas Mann. And then of the Thomas Mann I've read, I haven't read Joseph and His Brothers, but all of the other stuff I've read. I love Thomas Mann. I consider him somebody like Dostoevsky. I don't think he'll ever be unpopular totally. Over here, we've got some other books working our way into Spain and Italy. This book was phenomenal. Bartleby and Co. I absolutely love that book. Don Quixote is a great classic. I definitely encourage everybody to read it. It's phenomenal. Okay, so this is my my British shelf, and we're starting in the bottom corner. If you can see there, it's Zadie Smith into what's his name? Salman Rushdie. I have Midnight's Children and the Satanic Verses. I have not read the Satanic Verses. I read Midnight's Children. Above there, we can see the J.G. Ballard that I showed on my J.G. Ballard video. Over here, so I guess I should say this is actually chronological, roughly. To start in the British section, I don't know if you noticed that about my other sections, but they were roughly organized generally by chronology. So this is really the beginning of the British section. I've got a copy of Tristram Shandy Gentleman. I'm not sure if that should be technically Irish or British. I know the British like to claim it, but they're notorious for that, I guess you could say. This is a lot of classic British literature. If I were to choose the section of world literature as I understand it, that I feel could probably be most easily improved, my understanding of it, as quickly as possible, it would be British literature. I don't know a huge amount of the British writers from like the Victorian era. I'm a very big Henry James fan. I've read some Dickens. I read two of the Brontes, who are not Victorian, I don't believe. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is that my knowledge of some of these books on my shelves is a little lacking. So I have a copy of Jude the Obscure. I never read it. I plan on reading it eventually. Vanity Fair, never read it. Dombey and Son, I basically skimmed it because I had an assignment. But I don't feel comfortable saying I read it. Then I've got David Copperfield, haven't read it, and I haven't read Bleak House. So what is the Dickens that I have read? I read The Monk, which is not Dickens, but is on that shelf, and I read Great Expectations. I'm a very big fan of Great Expectations. Thought it was very well done. Now, this shelf begins to escape 1850s, I guess, and work our way into 1900 and into the modernists. I've got, my Conrad, W. Somerset Maugham, I guess is how you say that. I'm a big Conrad fan. Wasn't always, but I have definitely become Conrad-pilled. Over here, we've got, for some reason, My Middlemarch. I thought that book was great. I have not read everything up here. I haven't read the Ford Maddox Ford there. I have read Good Soldier, the one to the right, but not the big Parade's End. I don't really want to comment on Huxley or 1984 or any of that business, or Lord of the Flies for that matter. I like A Clockwork Orange okay. I read it in high school. I'm not sure I totally understood it. But I'm a big fan of the film. I would recommend that to people if they don't mind seeing some very unpleasant things. Now, the rest of the shelf, except for the Kingsley Amis, is like my favorite stuff. Malcolm Lowry's Under the Volcano is phenomenal. I cannot praise that book enough. Now, haven't read the Kingsley Amis. The Henry Green. Henry Green is good. He's recommended by Francine Prose in How to Read Like a Writer. That's how I learned about him. I've read Doting, and I've read one of the novels in that 3-novel collection. I read Loving. I've read some of the Berlin stories. I haven't read A Single Man. So now we're getting back down here. I guess this is approximately would be next on the chronological end. We're seeing the 1984. Max Beerbohm, I believe, is actually like 1920, so that's not right. E.M. Forster and D.H. Lawrence. I know it's not a universal opinion that D.H. Lawrence is a very great writer, especially not now when his politics, if one is to look into them, become so abhorrent. But at the same time, he's one of my favorite writers. So I can't praise D.H. Lawrence enough. I've read, I think 5. Is it? Sons and Lovers, Women in Love, Rainbow, Lady Chatterley's Love. So I've read 4 of them, and I really do recommend him. It looks like I have Aaron's Rod, but I haven't read that. I also have In the Other Room, which won't be appearing in this film or this video, a copy of The Plumed Serpent. I don't know if I'm up to reading it now, but I did try to read it like 3 weeks ago. I got derailed from all of my reading and started reading French novels again after finishing William Beaumont. I read an Amélie Nothomb novel, Stupor and Tremblement. Et je lu, I read some stuff in French, Marie and Daye. But that's what I'm doing now. Let's bring ourselves back here. The Forsyth Saga. Now, he won a Nobel, but I haven't read him. And he's one of my parents' friends' favorite novelists. And she got an English degree from one of those very prestigious institutions, 50 years ago. What you see here is Graham Greene. Graham Greene, that I like Graham Greene is proof that I will read religious fiction and writing, despite that I myself am not somebody who very ardently practices anything like that. But the Graham Greene I have is Brighton Rock, The Quiet American, and what's the other one? The Heart of the Matter. Now, I've read The Heart of the Matter. I didn't read that copy of it. The book is very concerned with when it's appropriate to take communion. And to somebody who is not a practicing Catholic, the obsession with this can seem confusing. I want to show some kind of respect here. I'm not sure how to approach this. It's just that it's not something that's tangible in my life to have this concern. Because of that, there was some drag on the novel. There's some engaging stuff that happens elsewhere. So there's some engaging stuff that happens elsewhere in the novel, but I am somebody who found Brighton Rock to be much more engaging. It still addresses theological questions. My favorite Graham Greene novel is The Quiet American. It's essentially a bit of a spy novel. It's a very good novel. I don't have anything negative to say about it. I've read 1 or 2 other Graham Greene novels. Let's say 1, but I can't remember what it is. I don't own it. If you see to the right of that, you'll see Evelyn Waugh. I became interested in Evelyn Waugh because of V.S. Naipaul. And it became important to me to read him, especially because the Modern Library 100 novels list listed him as so significant. B.S. Naipaul's similarity to Wall is predominantly in the humor in the writing. Aside from that, Wall was a bit of a globetrotter. So in many ways he was very conservative and so on and so forth, and very folksy. But in other ways he was very adventurous, and he was in the military and all of this other stuff. I have not read I, Claudius or Claudius the God. The John Fowles there is the French Lieutenant's Woman. Haven't read that. The Magus I have read. Over here we've got the J.G. Ballard I've read. I didn't read the short story collection. We've got some Iris Murdoch. She's good. And now what we're getting to is, for the most part, the truly contemporary. So this is the essentially truly contemporary stuff in British literature, and there are some Nobel Prize winners in this bottom row. This first section here, all of those are books by B.S. Naipaul. I have read all but 3 of them. I didn't read the 3 on the right. Yes, those are the 3 I have to read still. I don't know what to say about B.S. Naipaul. I find him very funny when he wants to be. He can be very pretentious. He has some very conservative opinions that can be very off-putting. That said, his novels are hilarious when he wants them to be so. The novel I like to recommend people is The Mimic Men. If I were truly just going to recommend you the best novel of that group that I've read there, I would give you A House for Mr. Biswas. But The Mimic Men is shorter. It's easier to get people to read. It's not quite as funny as A House for Mr. Biswas, but there are a few jokes in it that had me laughing very heartily. So, here we've got Robert Ackman. I haven't read that collection. I have read most of another collection. I've got my Doris Lessing, who I'm a very big fan of. I've got Martin Amis, who I'm not super a big fan of. I've got Kazuo Ishiguro, and I've got Julian Barnes. Flaubert's Parrot is one of the funniest postmodern novels I think I've read. It's also a very great biography of Flaubert and a critique of the form. And finally, we're in that present day section of, England. There are living writers, Zadie Smith. I haven't read the Eliza Clark. I've got Ian McEwan, Salman Rushdie, and A.S. Byatt just recently passed away. So if you can see in there, I've got 2 of the Beckett collection that I've seen with many influencers. It was a 4-part collection that was released on the centennial of his, his birth. I've got Flann O'Brien. Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility are over here because they wouldn't fit over on the British section. I've got Colm Tóibín and my favorite, William Trevor. These are some of his novels. I've read some of his novels. I haven't read all of them. Up here we've got more William Trevor. We've got The Picture of Dorian Gray. My critique of the Picture of Dorian Gray is that it's a really fun novel to read. Like, it's really fun to read. But that's about all it's good for. It doesn't sustain conversations with quite the same depth as certain other things. It's mostly just enjoyable. I'm a big Weisman's fan though. He's, discussed in it. Over there you'll see my Joyce, the Poetry and Exiles. And Finnegan's Wake, that is my copy. I did read Finnegan's Wake. I don't know how impressive that is for my audience. I think there are certain audiences who would find that incredibly impressing. And then there are certain audiences who would be like, yeah, well, I read it 3 times in the past 2 years. So who didn't read Finnegan's Wake? I'm just not sure who I'm attracting. If you see up here, I've got a finger trap. And these are some British books that I have not read, and some that I have. I haven't read the Pamela, and I haven't read Dracula. I didn't read that, my Oedipus Complex and Other Stories. The other 2 items there are the Brontes, and I have read those, and that's my copy of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I've read that. I'm a big fan. Okay, so that flowery book on the right is actually a James Joyce Ulysses. For some reason, I needed a second edition of the book, a second copy, and that was inexpensive. So I don't remember why exactly I bought it, but it served its purpose. Beside that, we've got Pedro Páramo, some Carlos Fuentes. I've read the Páramo, I haven't read the Fuentes. This is not all of the Bolaño I've read, but I have read these 2 Bolaño. In general, I think Bolaño is a great writer. I think Nazi Literature in America is probably an unsung great book, and that if people are really interested in Roberto Bolaño, they should give that book a check out. Now, going from there, we've got an out of place Gabriel Garcia Marquez, probably couldn't fit it anywhere else, and then a bunch of Mario Vargas Llosa. Now, I think I can say that I have significant political differences with certain opinions that Mario Vargas Llosa held, and were probably the reasons for his falling out with Gabo. But I absolutely love his books. I've mentioned Aunt Julia and the Scriptwriter before. The Bad Girl is a great novel. It's a romance novel. It's about a man who falls in love with a quote-unquote bad girl. The bad girl represents a country's involvement with communism. It's a wild metaphor, but essentially the bad girl goes to a country during a time when there's a transition into or away from communism, and the environment changes accordingly. I'm not sure what else I can show you from this shelf that is really going to teach you or show you anything you haven't seen already. Up here we've got Cortázar and my other Gabo. I don't know how many Gabo books I've read, but it's of the same magnitude of some of the writers where I've presented their entire works. So I've got some weird books here. As you can see there, I've got a Jeff Bezos biography. I haven't read that. Let's see. I've got Octavia Butler here, and Maggie Nelson and the Argonauts. This before was my shelf for the theater and stuff, but it became my movie shelf and Canada into US. So I've got Mavis Gallant there, Alice Munro, Ondaatje. I've got Marion Engels Bear. I've got Mistborn over here for the US. I've got Margaret Atwood. And then we're going over into kind of more, other stuff. There's not really a rhyme or reason to this section of the US. There's one shelf that I'm fascinated with trying to get just right. But as far as this goes, this is basically just the I'm not done organizing my American section yet shelf for America. Now, if you can see there underneath, those are movies. A lot of those movies are Criterion Collection or bought from places outside the US. That's a lot of, I wouldn't say it's good practice for learning a language to watch a lot of films. I tried watching like 30-some French films over and over again. I could eventually follow pretty much all of the films before I was speaking better. Now I would still run into issue with certain ones. But there are better ways to study French, is all I can say about that. That said, I've learned a whole lot about French movies. And I really like French movies. I think they're the bee's knees. Alright, so that's that shelf. And now we're going to talk about more US stuff. Alright, so this is a lot of short fiction in the US. Trying to maneuver where I have things positioned so you can see. It's a lot of short fiction. I don't know what else to say. You'll see above that also is a lot of short fiction. Some of these writers appeared in that short story video. That big hardcover book, Stories in an Almost Classical Mode, has some of the strangest short stories that I've read, realist short stories. Very, very strange, kind of almost immature content, but at the same time seeming very lofty. It's very, very unusual. That's not a hard endorsement for him. That's just me pointing out a book that I read that I don't see a lot of people read. And it does have some classic status to it, so it would be interesting to see more people read it. There are some more short fiction books. And James Salter, also the Desperate Characters book, the red novel. Let's see if I can get it a little better. If you see that. Desperate Characters. That short novel is incredible. I was recommended that by the How to Read Like a Writer Francine Prose book. Okay. So as you can see here, this is some other contemporary American literature. Crick Crack, I guess you could say, is Haitian. But I've read a lot of this stuff. I haven't read everything. But there's no need for me to go through and count out each item for you. Now up here, did you see the Mary Gateskill? So a lot of this stuff is pretty mainstream, I realize. I try to make up for my obscurity by learning it in a second language. Up here I've got some Jonathan Latham. I don't see him talked about a lot online. People don't seem very interested in him. I had a college teacher who was obsessed with him. I love Jonathan Latham now. Fortress of Solitude is a great American novel. Then we've got some Dennis Johnson. I guess I got 5 or 6 of those. Some short stories. Dennis Cooper, if you know him, you know him. Octavia Butler, Kurt Vonnegut, and James Dickey's Deliverance. I love that book. Okay, so this is nonfiction shelf number 2. You can see a lot of what's on there. That is a copy of 12 Rules for 12 Rules for Life. I read some books on Puritanism. I was thinking of writing something about that and realized that after I had read those things, I had misconstrued ideas about what Puritanism was. which changed my writing project so much that I basically just abandoned it because it was very ignorantly designed, and I really didn't know what I was talking about. I don't know how many people ever feel that way about something, but I'm not embarrassed to say it. It felt good to learn that. On the left, I've got Thomas Dickinson, George Orwell, Paul Bowles. I don't know what else to say. That Rick Perlstein trilogy, historic trilogy of Nixonland, The Invisible City, and Reaganland, or The Invisible Bridge, but whatever the hell it was, The Invisible Item. I read Nixonland. I haven't gotten to the second one yet. I thought that it was a really good thing worth reading. So this is the bottom shelf of that nonfiction book shelf. Not all of these books have I read. I haven't actually read the James Joyce biography that is so famous. I kind of wish I had, but so be it. And over here we've got a lot of stuff about the occult and tarot. I don't know if I've mentioned, I've read enough books to know how to read tarot. A lot of times symbols imply certain things, or you can use them as kind of an anchor and extrapolate from there. It's a magic trick. I at one point had dreamed of a world where there was a true believer, but I read that A History of the Occult Tarot history book of tarot, and a lot of the people who have become the most famous about it are charlatans and do not believe it themselves. There are practitioners who believe tarot, but it's just when you get up to that scale and what's going on, the readings are very, very different. Okay, so this is the shelf that is my project. I've read almost every book on this shelf. On the top row, over there, is Philip K. Dick. There are like 13 or 14 of those, and I go through, and basically everybody is a postmodern writer. Saul Bellow is not, and William Styron is not. But I've read all of those writers. I feel quite proud of myself for that. And then this second row down here, I've read everything on this row except for the Ishmael Reed Conjugating Hindi. So that is Sylvia Plath, Frederick Exley, Capote, Bukowski, Kathy Acker, Morrison, Cormac McCarthy, Robert Stone, a lot of these writers in their entire work. And on the bottom, I have made some changes here. I included my William T. Volman, which is a new edition. I have read The Rifles, The Ice Shirt, Royal Family, Butterfly Stories, Whores for Gloria, Rainbow Stories, and You Bright and Risen Angels. Other books that I would really recommend on this row would be the Barry Hannah. The Robert Coover is good. He's not my favorite writer of all time, but what's a real shame is that I think it's called the Baseball Association, J. Henry Waugh Prop. It's a very good novel, but it's out of print now, and that's very disappointing. But other than that, the only thing that I can think of that is maybe unusual for this bottom row is the Joyce Carol Oates. I've read 2 of her tetralogy, The Wonderland Quartet. The novels are unrelated, which make it a little more difficult to get motivated to read them again. But one was a gift from my mother, so it's very likely that I will read that before too long. Okay, so I took that moment that the camera dropped down to cut off and go to the next segment. I am making this over the course of a few days, so it turned out to be a good idea to separate up the segments like that, even if I'm not quite so driven to take, numerous takes and everything. Some things might be slightly re-recorded. Right now, I'm reading a Jean Ecano novel called Jim and Vey, or I'm Leaving. And this is the second day of doing this, and I wanted to put it off to the third day because I'm running low on battery. And I couldn't get focused on my novel again. So I'm going to try to finish off the tour, and we'll go from there. So this section in the American Lit section is the most in tune with the chronology that move. Generally, the idea was to vaguely organize things by author's birth date, and the American section, because there are so many books in it, is much harder to do that with and requires much more maneuvering. So, before I started making a mess of the show with my postmodern shelf, here we go with stuff going from the 50s back to 1860, I think, or 70. We've got Richard Wright, Invisible Man, excuse me. We've got Ralph Waldo Ellison, Invisible Man. It's a great novel. I've got 2 books by John Updike. If you see in between that, there is Myra Breckinridge by Gore Vidal. And the movie made on that book is considered one of the worst movies of all time. The novel's not terrible. It reads like an immature Kurt Vonnegut. A little more teenage-brained, I guess would be the way to put it. Then we've got my Paul Bowles over here, the fiction novels, short stories. A copy of Stoner that I never read. I DNF'd Stoner. I've tried to read it twice. One time wasn't very serious. I did give it a serious go. DNF'd it. I would consider trying to read it again. I don't DNF books often. I generally enjoy most books that aren't very sloppily done. So I'm sure if I gave it another go, I'd probably enjoy it. We see a complete Essential Baldwin by the Library of America. I've read 4 Baldwin novels, so I haven't read all of those. But that's a good collection. We've got Richard Yates and John Cheever. When I first thought of making a YouTube channel, one of my first writers I wanted to cover was John Cheever. And that's because his sense of humor is so in line with the postmodern writers, so I often think of pairing them together. Then we've got Richard Wright. I haven't read that. So I've read just about that whole shelf. Yeah. So that's that shelf in American literature. Now going to slightly earlier, I've got Flannery O'Connor, John O'Hara. That's a great novel. Walker Percy, some Ayn Rand. I haven't read as much Steinbeck as I wish I had. So I've read the 3 short Steinbecks, but I didn't read Grapes of Wrath. I've got a Chandler, and Hammett only wrote 5 novels. I've read the 2 on the right. I haven't read the other 3. I thought, I could read 5 Hammett novels and be very knowledgeable about him because I would have read all of them and basically be able to make a movie if necessary, if I got bored. We're going over here. Now, again, this is meant to be, let's just say it corresponds to the era the writer was writing. My original goal here did escape me a bit. When you're dealing with a much longer period of time or a fewer number of writers, it's easier to organize the things the way I had intended. Also, I have finite shelves, so shelving aesthetics to a certain point has to dictate where I move things. Okay, so below this shelf with Henry Miller and Studs Lonigan and Chandler and Flannery O'Connor, we have a shelf with our our biggest Nobel winners. We've got Faulkner. Now, I've read a lot of Faulkner, but I have not read all of Faulkner. And I think I'm probably missing 5 novels in total. I haven't read the Snopes trilogy. I haven't read A Fable. And then his last comedic novel I haven't read. I think I've read all of the other novels. I've been reading Faulkner for 20 years. I started reading Faulkner when I was a teenager, a late teenager, I think, or maybe even mid to late, probably around like 18. And I'm almost 40 now. Some of these books I don't remember super well. Let's move my camera a little closer and see if we can get the titles in there. That was the whole point of trying to get the lamp here for you. So, if you can see, there's the Faulkner. Now, I would recommend people read the collected stories. I think Faulkner's collected stories is great. I really do strongly recommend that to basically everyone. Yeah, other than that, I think Faulkner has... If I Forget the Jerusalem, I think is underrated. I know the man carrying thing guy didn't love it, but I like it. And it was very popular in France and in South America. So if you're reading writers to understand influence, it's important to understand where those books became famous. And oftentimes, people who are not super famous, like Faulkner himself, in the United States, will become famous elsewhere for strange reasons. And then the fame might come back. But with Faulkner, you can learn about French literature, for instance, by reading If I Forget the Jerusalem. It's mentioned in Al Bout de Souffle, the Jean-Luc Godard film, the first one of his, or Breathless, you might have seen that as. So I recommend Faulkner, but I would really... Faulkner was one of the first writers where I took the initiative to read outside of the recommended reading. The other thing I would say is that the collected stories really is a great collection. The same way my other short story books go, Faulkner's collected stories is a great book. Go Down Moses has some good stuff in it, but it's not my favorite collection. But other than that, Faulkner's Faulkner. Now, leaving Faulkner, you can see Nightwood. I read Nightwood because I was reading Nightwood and the Jane Bowles novel, Two Serious Ladies, to read some lesbian fiction. Now, Jane Bowles, I don't know if I don't think I pointed her out, but she is up there on my shelf next to her husband Paul. But Paul Bowles, as I've said, is one of my favorite writers. A friend of mine from college introduced me to him, and when she introduced me to him, I was completely unimpressed by Paul Bowles. I don't know why, it just didn't stick with me. I think I wanted to seem cool. I come back, 15 years later, and he's one of my favorite writers. But we're looking here at this shelf with Faulkner, and I'm looking at Hemingway, and I've read all the Hemingway that's there. So I've read a lot of the Faulkner. I read the Judah Barnes. I've read some of the Algren. I've read the Hemingway. F. Scott Fitzgerald, despite that I'm a huge Richard Yates fan, is less interesting to me than Hemingway. That said, Hemingway sometimes is not my favorite writer, but I do think he's great. I wish that more people had read To Have and To Have Not, which we're close to seeing right there. So I wish more people read To Have and To Have Not. To Have and To Have Not is a great adventure story. F. Scott Fitzgerald, like I said, is less interesting to me than Hemingway generally. I did like The Great Gatsby, but I didn't like it the first time I read it. Is the Night reminded me of James Salter. I didn't read Beautiful and the Damned. I do have that copy of that. That Thornton Wilder book, The Bridge of San Luis Rey, is a great short novel. Very entertaining, very enjoyable, very smooth reading. Then we've got Sherwood Anderson, and Sherwood Anderson is most known for Winesburg, Ohio. That's that collection there. I love that book. Theodore Dreiser, I think, writes terribly, but his novels are great. As a writer or an author of novels, he's incredible. But as a prose stylist, there's a lot to be desired. It's just kind of it's sometimes it has its charms, and there are certain things about the impression that he gives of grandeur that is quintessentially his and is just a great display of artistic talent. That said, there's something missing with him. The actual poetry is oftentimes not immediately available. So this is the final shelf of the American section. You can see the Sinclair Lewis there. I haven't read those. Max Brand is a pulp western novel. I read that for an American Lit class I had, where my teacher, his philosophy was heavily influenced by various types of theory, and he really didn't have a strong passion for what I would have thought of as quality art. We read a lot of pulp stuff. So we read Max Brand, we read Uncle Tom's Cabin. We were representative of certain different groups of American literature that don't get as much notice. But the class was not what I was expecting at all, and was a rude awakening for the first couple of weeks until I realized that my teacher knew better than me, and he displayed himself as quite brilliant very frequently. But I guess what I'm saying is that I can understand if people at times are turned off by what are seen as too contemporary or modern teaching styles. But I ultimately learned a lot from that class. I do feel I need to justify that book on my shelf still. It's not totally my thing, but it's a pulp western. I read it in an afternoon in my car, and it was enjoyable. Now going over here, we've got some Edith Wharton. I've read that. I haven't read the Chopin, the Kate Chopin, and then we're getting into my beloved Henry James. Let's see. I've read all of the Henry James here, except for the Princess Cassie-Massima. So I think it's like 10 or 9 books. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, 2 books here. I didn't realize. I haven't read The Tragic Muse either. But yeah, so we've got 3 there, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I read 10 of the 12 books I have here. That is a Barnes & Noble Portrait of a Lady, and also a great short works, Barnes & Noble Henry James. That's acceptable. Henry James is in the public domain, so buying books for him is really just, you make do with what you can. The editions aren't terribly important. And then we've got these final books over here. We've got some Herman Melville, Moby Dick, and Billy Budd. I read both those. Scarlet Letter, I love that. There's my Uncle Tom's Cabin. And there is my Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Excuse me. So this is the top of the American Lit section, and you can see the H.P. Lovecraft there and the Alison Bechdel graphic novel, but you'll probably notice that the only other thing there that's American is Harvey Pekar. This is mostly French graphic novels for me. Tintin was fun. I read him after I needed to. I could have read him for more educative purposes when I was worse with the language, but by the time I read him, I was already reading novels. Tintin's fun though. These books, Bug, are a French graphic novel series. It's like a sci-fi thing, but I haven't actually read those three. Moi, René Tardy, Prisonnier de Guerre, au Stalag du Bé, is a graphic novel memoir, sort of like Mouse, but it's about time in prison camps, not concentration camps. Then we've got a group of Manchette and Tardy. Tardy is the illustrator. Manchette is a crime novelist in classic French crime novels. So that is actually a collection of, I believe it's three. Yes, three. Show that to you. That's Tardy's style, and it's three crime stories. And I don't know, he's great. A lot of his work has been translated into English. You're not going to find otaku exactly for French literature, but there is definitely a fandom around French graphic novels. Elise et les Nouveaux Partisans is a this is a story about a left-wing workers' rights protester. It was a good story. There's a CD associated with it. So if you go to Spotify, and I'm going to show you the name again just in case you're curious, and you search for Elise et les Nouveaux Partisans, and you look up Dominic Grange, you'll find French Union songs on Spotify. It's pretty cool. Then I've got a book called Mademoiselle Baudelaire, but I can't actually show it. The cover of the book is a little risque, and likewise the content of the book is a little risque. It's an interesting book, especially if you're as interested in Baudelaire as I am, but you know, I don't know if it's available in English, and unless you're a Baudelaire nerd, I'm not sure it would matter to you. So these three books to the right of that say Cabane, Manchette, those are graphic novels of a different illustrator working with the same crime novelist and turning them into these great works of art here. Now the last thing on my shelf is a sci-fi French graphic novel called Carbone et Silicon. It means carbon and silicon. It's basically about sentient robots, you know, androids or whatever they're called, and the way their consciousness transfers through generations. It was very interesting. My old French tutor recommended it to me, and I really enjoyed it at the time. So we've got two more big shelves. The first of those we're going to focus on is French, and the second we're going to focus on is my theory and philosophy, and then we will be done. Hello guys, this is day 3. This is actually my 3rd day of trying to make a video. Right now you're looking at my French section. So I'm going to go through this, but just for frame of reference, you're probably quickly seeing that my French section is really only second to my American fiction, which for whatever reason includes Henry James. A lot of people don't consider Henry James American and say he's British. He did become British. Personally, I don't really think much of it. It's not important to me. So you're probably seeing a shaky camera because I'm holding it. I appreciate your patience for looking at my graphic novels, but there's really no easy way to position the tripod in relation to what I want to show you and reaching up here. This is like six, almost 7 feet off the ground, probably 6'5", something like that. So my issue is that, what was I going to say? Yeah, I've got a lot of stuff here. So there's a lot of controversial stuff up here we'll get to, and I'll show you that. But there's also some stuff that can only really be understood in relation to one another between my English language theory and some of the things that exist on the French bookshelf and vice versa. So we're going to start here and work up to the top of the French section, the land of French language, because this isn't just France. And the first book, look at that, it's a translated Rabelais, so not even in French. This was a phenomenal translation of Rabelais, if you are curious. I've also got a book by Mikhail Bakhtin. His book on Rabelais is likewise great. It's like an Eric Auerbach, but just about Rabelais. Next here, we've got Molière. You can try to adjust that to make it more clear for you, but I have to actually hold my arms kind of above my head to see up here. Just a few inches though. One thing you've probably noticed is I'm not talking about every book we pass over. I don't know if we've really gotten to the point where you're seeing that I do have 1,500 books, and that's a lot of them. That Joseph de Maistre in French. I read the longest work in it, but that's the only thing in there I've read. Commenting on every book I've read is annoying, just like I feel less annoyed telling you the stuff I haven't read, but I realize now that if I'm competing for the perception that I'm better read than the average guy in order to build some type of audience here, just telling you when I have a whole row of something I haven't read yet but got a wild hair and decided to buy, it's funny to me, but it's probably not the best for the channel. You are seeing French and English here. This Baudelaire includes basically all of his writing. I've read all of that. It's about 4,000 pages. I've also got this additional Baudelaire. This has a short story in it, Le Fanfarlo, which is not included in his Bibliothèque de la Pléiade, which is rare. A lot of stuff gets included in those collections. I have read Madame Bovary in French and in English. It was one of the first French novels I read, and I had a horrible time with it, so I haven't really read it in French, except to say that I basically gave myself a huge amount of homework when I decided to read it. Comte de Lautréamont, bon, he's great. C'est génial, super. Here is one of my Huysmans. This is Celine's London Bridge. It only fit here. So I had trouble finding a location for it on the library. Beneath that is more Marquis de Sade. I've read some of de Sade, I'm sure I've said before, but I actually don't like him very much. I'm getting this out because this is a risque novel by Guillaume Apollinaire. Now, I show you this because it's clearly a public domain book and was printed on the spot for money on the river that runs through the jungle, Point FR, the bookstore, the website, and it's not widely read. It's a adult story about a late teenage boy who seduces tout le monde. But it's fun to have a copy of that book. I love Apollinaire. I don't know how many people who don't speak French have seen Apollinaire. So let's get this book down here. And so maybe it's not a terrible thing for me to be holding my camera and shaking it everywhere because I can do stuff like this. So Apollinaire was known for the calligram. And the calligram is essentially writing poetry in a picture. And these are some simple ones that you're seeing here. But these get pretty complicated. Let's see if we can get some more images going on here of Apollinaire. And this is a phenomenal collection. This is the calligram book, but it's in English and French. If you see here, this right page is English, and this is French. And this is, of course, very important if the poetry you're reading. There is a lot of scholarship here, as you can see. I have not read all of the scholarship. I have read some of it. But if you're looking at I'm trying to see, there are certain calligrams that are very complicated and actually kind of hard to read if you speak French. I'm assuming if you're not native, because I had a horrible time. You can work between the English and the French, even if you don't know any French at all. See, this is actually written out. And we can see what that's like in French in his original hand. And you can make comparisons. So this book here this is a top 3 poetry book of all time for me. This specific edition. And I'm saying that because you should go out and buy it and read it. It's really something else. It's phenomenal. So that shelf, though, aside from the Apollinaire, that row here, clearly Montaigne, however I should pronounce that, and Céline did not write at the same time as Flaubert and Le Comte de Lautréamont. This is a Rimbaud and Verlaine collection, probably redundant. I have 2 Bibliothèque de la Pléiade of Verlaine, and the only one of Rimbaud. You've seen that before. I've read one of those Verlaine almost. The one I basically finished, it had the poetry in it. I think there were some essays or some text that's not, poetry and in stanzas. But I did not read the other one of these books. I have read that. This is my Mallarmé. In English, I don't like him. I have a book right there in English. And let me tell you, it is my strong opinion that some of these French writers are just untranslatable. Because I love the Mallarmé in French, but in English, it's just meh. I mean, check it out, but you're really not missing a huge amount. That is Zola, Huysmans. Now I have a Huysmans Bibliothèque de la Pléiade. It's one of these books. It's about like 1,200 pages or 1,400 pages. It contains the bulk of his novels. I've read the first 3 novels in it, which I believe were like novels 4, 5, and 6, or 3, 4, and 5 in his career. But I've read those, Le Bas and Au Rapport. Here we have my Alfred Jarry. I have a video on Jarry. I have a video on Alain Fournier. Le Revolt des Anges. Here we've got more Apollinaire. And now we're getting into Gide. So this Counterfeiters is a very good book. And we're talking about Gide, so I don't know if you're familiar with Gide. Gide needs to be talked about. If you look into his personal life and his history, he is one of the most repulsive literary figures of the 20th century that I know of. He really is, and he's up there on a level with Celine, or worse even, probably worse, I would say. The Counterfeiters is a phenomenal LGBTQ novel. I really recommend it to everyone. Now this, I recommend to no one. This book is on a level with Celine's pamphlets. This is Gide's attempt to basically justify, via Platonic dialogue, his abusive habits. So Gide was somebody who abused people, young people, people who weren't always ready to begin to handle that. Trying to avoid certain words here, but this book is Gide basically saying, hey, this is a great style of life to live, and I have done nothing wrong. This is not an LGBTQ book, really. There's some LGBTQ stuff in it, but this is about some much different practices. I don't know if it's available in English. It's one of the most offensive books I've ever read. This is a much better known book by Gide. This is a French-English copy. I mean, personally, I think Corydon is a worse book because this at least pretends to be fiction. Corydon is not fiction. It's an attempt at a philosophical treatise. So I have 3 books by Gide. I'm basically telling you these 2 are not very good, but this one is incredible. So I realize it's probably kind of strange, but if the 21st century had been kinder to Gide, he would probably be one of the most famous classic writers from the first half of the century. The 21st century was not kind to Gide because Gide was unkind to some innocent people, and thus we don't really talk about him anymore. We don't talk about him especially because of books like this, but the Counterfeiters is an incredible book if you're curious about a classic LGBTQ novel. This is my Proust, and there's my French copy, de Côte de Chez Soi. I've read that. I've read all of Proust. I don't even consider it really a spectacular thing to read all of Proust. It's something that I feel like if you want to write at a certain point in your life, you go through a time where you're into Proust. And if you're in that time for more than a couple months, you'll just get through the whole novel by virtue of your interest. So I recommend people read Proust. It's 4,000 pages in my translation. It's great. I'm not insulting people who haven't read him when I say that. I'm telling you, you should read him. You should read Proust the same way you should read Joyce or Beckett. Or not Beckett, Kafka. But yeah, he's on that level. So then we've got André Breton, surrealist. Very interested in him. The actual writings of the surrealists, other than Salvador Dali, I think are much different than people would expect. They tend to be much more political. Um, they're not cartoony. There are not melting clocks. There's a lot of very extreme experiences. People with mental health problems. It's a pretty complicated movement, surrealism, and it's a little different than we think in the U.S. You're looking at my Celine. So I've read all of this Celine and London Bridge, which is on the shelf above. This is the late trilogy that we've got. Celine, The Voyage au bord de la nuit, More au crédit. I read half of that in French, just about, or a third, quarter, somewhere in there. I found the French very difficult and just lost interest. I could have done it, but I might do it now. I'm more interested in reading Celine again. I did not find the French of Voyage au bord de la nuit too difficult, though. So, it's not the writer, I guess is what I'm saying. The specific book, some of the discussion of illness, I found difficult. So Celine has two other books I'm aware of in English that I have not read. In the past couple of years, I believe it's 3 novels greater than 400 pages written by Celine have been found. They were in his papers. One of them, I think, is a historical fiction. So I believe they're a little unusual for what we think of Celine, but they're very much his. I have not read any of those. If this was 10 years ago, and I had heard that there was Celine available that I had not read, I'd probably be jumping for it. But in general, one does come off Celine eventually, usually. And I don't know what else to say. I would happily recommend all of the Celine I've read, except for maybe Guignol's Band. I just didn't think it was as good as his other work. It's not that I thought it was bad. Now, London Bridge has some pretty unusual topics for contemporary fiction. The way they're written about, it's more like Lolita, if you understand what I'm saying. The 3 pamphlets by Celine are terrible. I have read them. I've read defenses of them now that I've finished other things. Kristeva manages to find some stylistic merit to them, but I wouldn't recommend them. So in total of Celine, I've read the 3 pamphlets, and Semmelweis. If you can find a copy of Semmelweis in English, or if you can get it in French and you read French, Semmelweis is an amazing biographical novel. He wrote it as his medical doctor's thesis. It's a novelization of the life of the man who discovered the medical benefit of washing hands. Now here we've got Colette. I have only read some of one of these. Then we've got My Bataille. This is all of his fiction I'm aware of. Some shorter works. It's a substantial amount of Bataille fiction. Let's see. I can show you the list. So this is what's in it. Let's see if I can give you a better look. We can scroll that. So we've got Histoire de l'Oeil, Le Bleu du Ciel, Madame Edwarda, Le Petit, L'Amour. Now why can't I get this clear? Julie, see? So, there we go. And, I think that people read the wrong Bataille. The very popular Bataille is Histoire de l'Oeil. Yeah, I said that terribly. Histoire de l'Oeil. Story of the Eye. Now, I'm having a horrible time getting this focused again. Okay, so people read Story of the Eye. I understand why it's liked. And I'm not saying you're wrong if that's the first place you go with Bataille. In my opinion, Le Bleu du Ciel is a much better book. It's written when he's a little more mature. He's directly talking about politics. There are his thoughts on writers like Simone Weil and others because they appear in the novel. It's a very complicated, full work, whereas Histoire de l'Oil is more like a novella, kind of a great first showing is what it is, and it should be treated like that. But he's got so much going on. And I'll just look at Bataille one more time. As you can see here, I've read Substantial Theory of Bataille. I've read Le Part Maudit, the complete trilogy, all 3 parts are here. So the second one is La Souveraineté, and then L'Histoire du l'Erotisme. Theory de Religion is great also. This Discussion sur le péché we've talked about. I don't know. Bataille is really worth reading. Over here we've got Gilles Dauphine. That was a great book too. I have not read all of Being and Nothingness. I've read a substantial part of it. I've read Nausea. This is a French copy of L'Âge de Raison. I read this in English in college. It was one of the first adult books that I read, having found it completely on my own. No recommendations from teachers or other students. I found a reference to Sartre in an essay that I was reading on Camus, who I was reading the summer after high school. And I read L'Âge de Raison. I actually had a long talk with somebody on the phone about that before getting on this video. Here are Sartre plays, No Exit. Now this is my French language Beckett, and also his critical work on Proust. And I was so happy to be able to find this. This is terrible. It's not terrible in the sense that like he's saying bad things. It's terrible in the sense that he just seems really pompous, and it's not actually a very thorough study of Proust. As you can see, it's pretty short. It's not the worst thing I've ever read, and if you're into Beckett and you're looking for Beckett, you know, it's worth reading, but just don't expect any fireworks. Here we've got Simone de Beauvoir. Now, I have read these in French. This is not the copy I read in French. I actually read this on my Kindle in French. But Le Deuxième Sexe, tome 2, c'est ça. And yeah, Simone de Beauvoir is, there is a YouTube channel called Read Red. I think the guy is Australian, but I'm not sure. I saw a video where he said that Simone de Beauvoir's work is in the interesting position of being simultaneously cutting edge and dated. That was actually a really bright insight, and I think it's a good thing to say about her. Trice Tropique. Now, I'm going to do a conclusion of this video, but basically this was recommended by Lamont. This is my Simone Weil. I read this. There's a video on it. Antonin Artaud. I read a large amount of this, but not all of it. This is on the abolition of all political parties by Weil, the NYRB book. There's a great essay in here by the Nobel Prize winning poet. What's his name? Czesław Miłosz. There's an essay by Czesław Miłosz. Here's my Camus. It's just the fiction and the myth of Sisyphus. I have a French copy of L'Étranger. One thing I did when studying originally French was I read the entire L'Étranger out loud. So that was difficult. Here's Eugene Ionesco. I talked about him earlier. Theater writer, a critical work by him, above the technology stuff. Françoise Sagan, Bonjour Tristesse. This is a phenomenal short work. It's very different than Carson McCullers, and she was very different than Carson McCullers, but it's by a young woman. And Carson McCullers was also a young woman. And Carson McCullers was very good. So this is like Carson McCullers in that it's very good and it's written by a young woman. So you should go out and read it, okay? It's just like that. Thanks. Margaret Duras, right here, Le Mans. Tropism, de Nathalie Sarraute. I've read this whole shelf from here, actually. So, I haven't read the Romain Gary, this one. Everything else, yes. So Nathalie Sarraute was a great French writer. We don't read her a lot in the U.S. I've read those. Jean Genet. This is my Jean Genet. I've talked about him quite a bit, I realize. That's because I really read what I've read of him most recently. This is all of his novels and a Bibliothèque de la Pléiade, Théâtre Complet. And I read that. Le Cum de Jour is a really fun book. I saw on the that one book, the Life on Books channel, that it was considered a pretentious book. I more just think of it as an obscure French classic. There are much more famous French books, much more complicated French books. It's a little like calling that movie The Science of Sleep or Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, a story kind of like that, and just saying it's pretentious. It's not really that it's pretentious, it's that it's a little unusual, and it's a little hard to copy. You know, once it's done, you can't do a book exactly like it, or people will just say, oh, you ripped off Le Cum de Jour. So there are those. Now here we've got the Guillotin, and we're getting pretty out of order as far as date of birth goes, as you've been able to tell. This is the Foucault that I have. I have not read this. This is Histoire de la Folie. Oui, Histoire de la Folie. That's a French copy, obviously. All the Foucault I've read in English. This is Althusser. This is Baidu. I'm a very big Baidu defender. I talk about him when it's inappropriate because not everybody can stand his politics. And further, he's not a very likable person. If you see videos of him talking and giving interviews, he's often, he's stuck on himself. He can be very pretentious, very bully-like. But in my opinion, he occasionally has an idea that I just have trouble forgetting. And so I've read more Badiou than this, but this is the Metapolitics, which is an okay book. I think the Metaethics is better, but or the Ethics. It is a work of metaethics, but that's Metapolitics, Badiou, Barthes. We've got Baudrillard there. J.M.G. Leclésio, you've seen him elsewhere in my room. I love this novel, The Interrogation. I don't want to talk too much about it. Basically, a guy is sans domicile fixe, and let's see, so he's homeless. He has a very strange relationship to the world, and it's a short retelling of the Robinson Crusoe story that is very, very different than the original. But there you see Leclésio, Patrick Modiano, to Margaret Yourcenar. So let's see, let's go back over this. After this, I have read on this shelf everything except for the French copy of Histoire de la Folie. I read J.M.G. Leclésio in French years after reading him in English as a way of doing, I guess, autotherapy, let's call it. I was going through a very stressful time, and I was reading it because a man winds up in a mental institution, and I thought, oh man, I need to calm myself down because I don't want to wind up like Adam Pollo from L'Interrogation.
or le procès verbal. Dysphoria Mundi is Paul B. Preciado's most recent work. It's a great Deleuzian-style philosophic work. This is his work, Je suis un monstre qui vous parle, this is an argument against Freudianism and Lacanianism, and really the whole practice of psychoanalysis. I found it a very enjoyable read, but you're going to see a lot of Lacan in like a minute, and it didn't sway me from liking Lacan. An apartment on Uranus is a okay collection. Testo Junkie. This is a phenomenal book. I recommend this to everybody. Manifeste Contrasexuel. So this is actually written in English, and I didn't know that. I knew that Preciado wrote a lot in French, so I thought, oh, I'll go get a French copy of this. I get the book, and I find out it's translated, and yeah. This is a book that's going to get me probably demonetized. If you can see the title, I think we're not allowed to say that word. I mean, I'm not monetized yet, so it doesn't matter, but that's what you're looking at. This was a phenomenal history book on... it should be read in tandem with Le Deuxième Sexe de Simone de Beauvoir. It's a history book of the magazine Playboy and certain concepts around architecture. And it ties them all together with questions of feminism, what is a man's good role in society, and all of these other questions. One thing about Paul Preciado is that he is a trans man. That's him. Let's see if I can get you a better look of that. That's him. I've seen him called one of the top 10 most influential people in the art world. So he was in a relationship with Virginie Despentes, who is here, and I learned about Paul Preciado through reading about Virginie Despentes. He is a gender theorist, if that wasn't clear. So the books of his that I would recommend most are this one on the bottom about Playboy. I'll show you that title again. Testo Junkie, which is a piece of auto theory. It's basically an edgy memoir mixed with philosophy. And then Dysphoria Mundi, which reads like Deleuze, if Deleuze wrote gender theory. So then what we've got down here is our Pascal Quignard. You'll see that. Now that's all of Le Dernier Royaume. A lot of these books aren't available in English. So, I think only like... So I've read all of the Pascal Quignard, but one of the reasons I learned French was to read writers like Pascal Quignard. He is a huge deal in France. And you can barely find his stuff in English. Like, he's got stuff. I think it's like 9 of his works. But when you've written something like 40 books, if only 9 are available, and your most significant work, a 12-volume kind of philosophic novel mixed with some kind of poetry, is unavailable, are you really available? Then we've got Michel Houellebecq. Read all these. I've read these and more. I've actually read other books that I don't have of Houellebecq. Lanzarote is a kind of subpar novella that's his, and it's not great. A lot of themes and images from that book do appear later in his career, though. So if you're reading all of Houellebecq in the sense of self-scholarship, you have to read Lanzarote. But I don't have a copy of it. I read my copy on my Kindle. So then we've got my copy of Anti-Oedipus. I read this in English. I have read Deleuze in French, though. So this is Deleuze's book on Foucault. It's actually a very informative book. If you can find it in English, I would recommend it. Now we're getting into my Lacan. I haven't read all of the Lacan, but this is a book on Lacan for popular study in French. I think these are available in English, I'm not sure. But I've got, I think it's seminar 4, what is it? So I've got seminar 3 until 7, I think, or this might be 8. No, that's Derrida. Is seminar 6, so 3, 5, 3, 4, 5. Oh, I do. I have them in order. My mistake. So the Lacan is it's right there. 3, 4, 5, and 6. This is the Dissemination. This is a book by Derrida in French. This is The Politics of Friendship. This is a book by Derrida in English. This book on my bookshelf exists in tandem with 4 books by Carl Schmitt that I guess I'll show you in just a second. But I would not have read the Carl Schmitt without doing a very, I'm very into Derrida, but I would not have read the Carl Schmitt without this book. This is basically a deconstruction of Carl Schmitt. Carl Schmitt has a philosophy based on a friend and enemy distinction, and for him, conflict is an essential part of politics. And it's omnipresent and eternal. It always happens. And what he believes is that all politics come down to a distinction between friend and enemy. Derrida basically says that you can't make friends if you approach someone like they're an enemy. Now, I know that sounds really simple, but just think about it for a minute. You've got this massively worked out political theory about friends and enemies and all these different things about relation, and Derrida just comes right over and he just knocks over the whole thing with one question. How do you make friends if you don't act like a friend first? And so if you're acting like a friend first, you're not acting in terms of an enemy and distinction. You're trying to grow your friendship base. So your whole criteria and your theory and everything there just gets thrown out the water. And Derrida is very good at that. If you've never read Derrida, he'll take a book that you're convinced is 100% right and accurate and just the most genius thing you've ever read. And Derrida will make sure you understand it is quite as smart as you think it is. It's just terribly wrong. That's Spectres of Marx. This is Deleuze and Guattari. This is a book on Lacan for beginners. My copy of Le Cri. Derrida, Perec, A Life of User's Manual. I have only read that in English. This is all of my Jean-Philippe Toussaint. I've mentioned him and how I might make a video on him. The Emmanuel Carrere. I'm trying to get through because I realize this video has already been 40 minutes, this take. So we're going to be, this is Carrere. And Virginie Despentes, who I've talked about enough. And then these are people I've talked about much less on the channel. Frederick Beigbeder, not a huge fan of him, think he's okay. 4 books by Angot. Yasmin Rosa's Babylon is a pretty fun short novel. En finir avec Elie Villegueux. That was a good piece of LGBTQ fiction. Alain Mabanku. He's also a translator for a book that was recommended on Life on Books, but he's a college professor out in California last I checked. He won Prix Ronaldo in French and several awards from Africa. He's a very distinguished novelist. I've talked about him before. I have more of his books, I just haven't read them yet. These 4 were all great. Vercassa is the best. Then Memoir de Porc-Épic, Petit Piment, and African Psycho. Leila Slimani is a Moroccan-French woman. She actually has a position in the French government and sometimes is shown on television, in an administrative role. But she made her reputation to the world as a very accomplished novelist. She won a Goncourt. Marie Ndiaye, I was just talking about her. This is Gail Fay. I talk about him in my introduction video if you want to go back and check that. Amelie Nothomb, I just read Stupor et Tremblement. I really enjoyed this. It is a piece of chick lit. She writes mostly chick lit, but she has a higher register. She's a very accomplished woman, and she's published something like 30 novels. They're all autofiction. There's a level of seriousness about her. She does occasionally talk about Belgian politics. This book was about Japan, Japanese work culture. I definitely learned some things about Japan I had not heard before. And so I do recommend her if you're looking for something a little lighter than the Bernard Stiegler or whoever I'm recommending you usually. But she's fun. Hervé Letellier, this was his Goncourt win. This is a great novel. It's told in a way that I have not seen done in the U.S. and Despont also tells stories like this. They'll tell a story cycle, and there will be like one unifying thing through it. And the way this is done is very masterful. So this is the story of like an aircraft that flies past a certain place and duplicates itself. And so there are copies of everyone on the aircraft, and it becomes a national affair. And there are chapters from the perspective of all of the characters and randomly Stephen Colbert. So Stephen Colbert does a show about it because he's talking about current events. It's quite funny to see the way the French envision Stephen Colbert. Colbert is portrayed kind of like a circus ringmaster, I guess is the best way to describe it. So now we're getting to other Goncourt winners. This is Mohammed Bougar Sarr. He won a Goncourt for this. If you like Roberto Bolaño, this is a phenomenal novel. He's written 4 novels. This guy is young. He's like 32 or something. This is the only one of those novels that is not available in English. De Pardon. Now, YouTube is actually the subject of this novel. A guy sees a very unsettling thing on YouTube on a current events channel, and he ends up going back to his home country, Senegal in Africa, and he basically investigates it like a reporter might, except that he's not a reporter. He's somebody who's concerned about, his home country and what's going on there, trying to figure things out. He's startled. He might be writing something. I can't actually remember. I just realized now he might be writing something. I can't remember. It's a good novel, but it's his worst. This one, a Goncourt. The Goncourt is like a French Nobel. It's not like an American Pulitzer. It has more cultural cachet. People who win the Goncourt tend to be recognized for the rest of their lives in a different way. Their sales are better, things like that. If I understand correctly. So for him to win this when he's, I think he was like 32 here, is really something else. This is the story of, it's the story of a poet who basically makes a collage like T.S. Eliot might, or somebody between T.S. Eliot and like a Kathy Acker. But he gets accused of plagiarism and ends up running off into Africa. So it's got a little bit of a Savage Detectives feel to it. And the epigraph for the novel is actually a page from Savage Detectives. If you see here, let's get that image a little better. So it's even quoting Roberto Bolaño, but it's a great book. It has Witold Gombrowicz as a character in it, which is interesting. Deals with race relations in France, how Africa is culturally in relation to France. A great story about poetry, famous characters. It's got it all in one Goncourt. That said, Silence du Coeur is probably my favorite of his 4 novels. This is a book where people from, I forget where, get moved to a place like Italy. It might be Greece. I'm not sure. Give me a second. Oh, I think they're in Italy, right? De la Campagna Sicilian. It sounds like Sicily. I don't know Sicilian in French, but yeah. So it's in the Mediterranean. Let's just leave it there. I've wasted enough time. So it's within the Mediterranean, and they basically get chased out by a very conservative faction of politicians in the region. They're refugees, and the book really tells this story that's kind of a hard story to hear about refugee life and nativism. And the book tells kind of a lighthearted story about it, the way it's told. It's available in English. It's called The Silence of the Choir, and it's really a phenomenal novel. I loved it. The last book is called Terre Sainte. Now, this means like belted earth, but the book is translated as Brotherhood. That's intentional. There's essentially a militia-like right-wing sort of government in this country, and they're called the Brotherhood. You can postulate as to why that might be. You can ponder. But yeah, they're not a specific play. They're not another Brotherhood. They're just the one for that novel. And their name is just Brotherhood. But they basically terrorize the populace, and it's a group of people trying to go through some sort of revolution or political change. It gets very thorough into how their governance works. And it's a fascinating novel. It was his first novel. I think he was like 23 or 24. But it's called Brotherhood. It's good. Silence of the Choir is incredible. That one's not available in English. And The Most Secret Memory of Men is great. This is my W.G. Sebald. I've read Vertigo, The Immigrants, The Rings of Saturn, and Austerlitz. I did not know when I bought those that W.G. Sebald basically spoke English fine and really kind of supervised the translation of his works from German to English. Had I known that, I would have read. Hello. Okay, so my phone or my camera just cut out there for a second. Forgive me for that. What I was saying is that had I known W.G. Sebald had competence with English and supervised his translations, I would have read him in English. This is a problem when you're studying a second language more than when you actually know one fluently. But I will occasionally make mistakes like that that impact my life more significantly than someone who can just read without without ever having to look something up, who speaks a language fluently, or who isn't going out of their way to try to learn something. I mean, he wrote them in German, so whether or not he did the actual translation is kind of irrelevant. But it is a misfortune from my overzealousness. This is Mathieu Sénard. Mathieu Sénard is known for Zone, Compass, tell them of battles, elephants, and kings or something. I have more of him than that. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, 7 short ones. So I have 7 of his books. I've read 4 of them. This one here, Rue de Voleur, I guess that would be translated as Street of Thieves or something. Remonte l'Ornac, and Le Banquet Annuel de la Confrérie de Fossoyeurs. I have not read. Here's Vivre Vite. This is Ori. This is not available in English, I don't think yet. There's a lot of controversy around this book. If you are interested in Algerian politics or French-Algerian relations or interactions with a lot of different African countries, I believe Muslim as well, obviously, then you should look into this book. It's called Hori. It won a Prix Goncourt. It's a great book, sort of. It was written very unethically, possibly. It's possible that the man basically based a character very clearly on a woman, and his wife was the therapist of the woman. So he may have had access through talking to his wife to many things that shouldn't have been shared with a stranger and wouldn't have been made public. They would have been shared in confidence. So here we've seen these books. There's the Bernard Stiegler on my channel before. There's Elena Ferrante I got in French. Akil Membe. And now, so on this, and I've been trying to tell you what I have read. I did realize that, maybe I should say something, except for the Matthias Nard I haven't read. These 3, I've read that shelf. So everything, also the Elena Ferrante I haven't read. So if we're looking at my shelf, at what it looks like to have read it, it's this shelf. So I've read those. Let's see. Now, I'm going to make one more cut, and we're going to do my my last shelf. The last shelf is the Philosophy and Theory. This is collected French stuff I haven't read, or I've read most of the Francophone. I haven't read all of it. Those are Alain Mabenkou books, a bunch of other French. So we'll do philosophy, and okay. So we're on my last shelf here. This is the Philosophy and Theory in English Language shelf. So I'm going to be completely honest. One of the things that I did when I was trying to figure out if I wanted to go to PhD programs was to look at syllabi in PhD programs, and I basically got books that I wanted to read that thought like they might appeal to me. Sister Outsider was pretty good. It wasn't my favorite, but I had not read any Audre Lorde. Haven't read this or that. Read that and that. So do you see why I feel sometimes why I might not want to say absolutely everything I haven't read? There's a possibility that all I can really say about it is that, it was interesting or it wasn't. That said, I've read a lot of this, but not all of it. I haven't read the Parfit or the Rorty. I have read Camilla Paglia. Virginie Despentes likes her, I don't. Is There a Text in This Class book by Stanley Fish is pretty good. I don't like Harold Bloom very much. Homike Baba was interesting. Orientalism, interesting. Wild Things and In a Queer Time and Place I haven't read. Female Masculinity was good. Queer Art of Failure was good. Signifying Monkey, loved it. Did not read God Delusion, but have it right there. This is the Zizek I've read that I like most. I've read about 5 Zizek. So this is the only one I own. Animal Liberation Now is good. This is less good. It's actually pretty good as a philosophy essay. Affluence, what is it? Famine, Affluence, and Morality. I haven't read a lot of Singer. I was a vegan for a while and a vegetarian, and that was long before I ever read that book. I read that book like 8 months ago. So I'm eating meat right now. It didn't really change me so much beyond just thinking stuff that I kind of had already been familiar with. That said, if you've never seen some things that are kind of common in vegetarian circles, you might be missing out. I'm sorry for moving the camera strangely there. I'm trying to figure out a way to get you to see what's over here. Practicing New Historicism. The Globe in print is about Shakespeare. I haven't read Practicing New Historicism or the Globe in print, and read that. I've read this, Why Not Socialism? Shulamith Firestone, I read. Andre Long Shu, Scrum Manifesto, read that. Read How to Influence Friends, or How to Win Friends and Influence People. Did not read this. I read Anatomy of Criticism. This was great, in contradistinction to the Harold Bloom, which I don't like. Judith Butler. I'm not going to go through all these opinions. It's really irrelevant. If you're curious, as I said, I've read about 66 to 75% of these books. The Sontag is, everybody should just read all 4 of these books. It's not a lot. It's less than 1,000 pages, I think, but the Susan Sontag is great. I'm a really big fan of Robert Nozick for some reason. I can't figure that out. I really like these 2 books, even though I'm not a libertarian. I would not vote for a libertarian. I am not a libertarian. I thought those 2 books were really interesting. He does kind of soften his approach in this one. But yeah, so I've got this also for the libertarian stuff. I've got like the Ayn Rand I've read. Trying to broaden my horizons. Here's Leo Strauss. Leo Strauss is interesting. I haven't read both of these, or all 3 of these books though. I've read Persecution and the Art of Writing. And this is the main reason I got interested in Strauss. I wanted to read his essays on Aristophanes. From Karl Mannheim, he's a social theorist. C. Wright Mills, The Power Elite, I haven't read that. I've read this Wittgenstein and this Lukács. Lukács is different if you've never read a Marxist. I really like him. I wouldn't go along with every essay in that book, though. He seems to defend political violence at a certain point. And, you can contextualize all you want, but at a certain point, you've got to say, I'm not going to totally get behind that. The Wicked Wit of Winston Churchill, my dad gave me that when I was sick one day. It was fun. Conquest of Happiness. Bakhtin is a favorite of mine. I've read these 3. Rabelais and His World. The Problems with Dostoevsky's Poetics. If you like Dostoevsky at all, or you are interested in Russian formalism, this is a very interesting book. Basically, this is, he's defending Dostoevsky in Soviet Russia, and why people should consider him a great stylist, or not necessarily a great stylist, but a significant one, and why that works. It has a lot to do with the way he theorizes dialogism, dialogue, dialectic, speech. So it's the way he approaches that. This late essays book I have not read. Haven't read that. Read a good chunk of that. Read that. Joseph, I have not read that. I have not read that. I read that. Haven't read that. Read that. Now here's the Carl Schmitt I mentioned. I do not believe in really anything Carl Schmitt has written. I do not approve of Carl Schmitt. I do not support his political views or his religious ones for that matter. But these are interesting books in context. And again, I read these books in context of reading Derrida. The Heidegger, read. Hannah Arendt, I've read some of. I've read the rest of these things up here. Benjamin, Adorno, what's his name? Horkheimer. This is a great book. When people ask me for an ethics book, this is what I'd like to tell people to read, except philosophy majors would probably laugh at me. One Dimensional Man is really good. This is not my favorite, Errors in Civilization. Reason and Revolution was interesting. I really like Max Faber, and these were worked on by C. Wright Mills. It's good. I've got the Shakespeare. Now, if you've never read one of these books to read Shakespeare, do not buy one of these books to read Shakespeare. Are you there? Yep. I read Shakespeare on my Kindle. Reading from this book was too hard, and the book I think cost more than $50. So this has just been sitting on my shelf, barely used because it's so heavy, and I just don't save yourself the money. We've got Burke, more Baber, what's his name? Dewey. I haven't read either of these John Dewey, but I've read other John Dewey. I got interested in John Dewey because there was a time when I was very interested in Noam Chomsky. I was never like a huge Chomsky guy, but you know, that was interesting to me. Max Stirner. Let's see, I'm going to try to get you a good view. I'm looking at my screen right now on my phone. I am not an accomplished videographer, if that's not clear. Aldous Marx. I haven't read the Grundrisse, but I've read all of my other Marx. Veblen. Thorstein Veblen. Kierkegaard, Hegel, Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, Kant. I've read more Kant than this. I'm a very big Kant fan, in part because I'm a fan of Althusser to an extent. So if you're curious, basically this whole row I've read. I have not read all of Aristotle. But yeah, the Locke and the Hume I've read, and I'm a fan. That's Thucydides. I had an uncle tell me a joke about a guy trying to buy Thucydides, and he thought his name was Thucydides. So here we go with more ancient Greek stuff. Then we're getting more into the philosophy, or the religion, I guess we should say. Okay. So that's my bookshelf. That is the complete tour of Mark's books. I'm going to do a conclusion, and then we'll do editing for this video, which is going to be a trick. Alright guys, here's the conclusion-rama, the conclusion. As you can see, I'm in different clothes. This has been the longest video project I've ever been a part of, except for maybe in school. I think I might have, in high school, done some video editing very briefly. I don't know what all to say. This has been a tiring experience for me, so I hope that it yields fruits in the way of internet points. I need to address that, as I said, almost all of my books come from book lists. You can get syllabi for college classes offline. you can find lists of the 100 greatest novels from numerous places. For my postmodern American shelf, most of those writers are on Larry McCafferty. He's a postmodern American literature critic. He made a 100 greatest novels of the 20th century list called The Greatest Hits. And you can get that on Wikipedia. I also use the Modern Library 100 list, which is the Modern Library Publishing Company put out a list of 100 novels they thought best represented the 20th century. I use the Time Best 100 Novels since 1923 list, which was excluding everything before 1923 because they didn't want to discuss Ulysses. I also use the Book Lubbin 100 Greatest Novels list, and that is a Northern European great books program essentially. And the novels in that list, some of them are very obvious, such as Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Kafka, Joyce. Some of them are significantly less obvious because they tend to be more modern. Another book that appears on that list that I adore is Season of Migration to the North. A lot of people don't know that novel exists. It's an NYRB book, and I do highly recommend it if you get the chance. It's very short. It's an enjoyable book. I'm a big fan. If nothing else, it can teach you about a part of the world that many, middle-class, white IT guys don't know a whole lot about. Now, so there's all those lists. What I'm going to do is provide some Wikipedia links to various lists. There's also a French list. Le Monde, the news journal, made a list of 100 novels that I've referenced. There are multiple colleges looking at mostly master's programs and PhD programs where I've gotten ideas for books. I explain this in my introduction video, who I am. I want to address that I have so many books because I recognize, I tell you I work in IT, and I do. Today is New Year's Eve. I was working today, and I'm making this after work on New Year's Eve. Start the new year off strong with a long video. I have an English degree from a large state school and an MIS degree from a city college or university, whatever I should call it. I don't have a whole lot else to say. I really hope this works out for you. I want to apologize for some of the changing of focus. I understand that that's happening frequently. I've tried to address that with text on screen where applicable. Editing this video is going to be a trick for me. It's certainly something that I haven't encountered, haven't made anything this long. But that's all I've got to say about this. So one last time, thanks for everything. You guys are great. I appreciate upvotes or likes, whatever you want to call it. Anything involving my channel is appreciated. You guys have a great day. Several books out. Bye-bye.